Welcome to the Sky Commander Flight Brief. It's your mission-ready podcast for drone pilot training and aerial insights across Canada.
From Transport Canada rules to real-world drone ops, we break it down, take you higher, and help you earn your wings. Because here at skycommander.ca, we don't just fly.
It hints there's more to it. It's a masterclass, a deeper level, maybe a philosophy or a community focus, perhaps.
It's definitely intriguing, sets them apart from just, a basic tips show. Skycommander.ca is the obvious next step. Precisely. If you're thinking about flying a drone in Canada, boom, this content is aimed right at you.
Powered by skycommander.ca.
The elite podcast for Canada's drone pilot. Okay, let's get started. Imagine this. Drones flying miles away, like way out of sight. They're navigating all on their own across the Canadian landscape. Think about the Arctic, how huge it is. Or pipelines stretching for hundreds and hundreds of kilometers. Or maybe remote forests after a really bad wildfire. This isn't science fiction anymore, not really. It's becoming the new reality for drone pilots, for operators right here in Canada. It's almost like they're training to be mini airline captains, but for drones. So today we're doing a deep dive into Canada's new framework. It's called Level 1 Complex, or L1C, and it's all about beyond visual line of sight BVLOS drone operations. And this isn't just some small tweak, it's a huge shift. It fundamentally changes how commercial drones can operate, making things that used to be super complex, maybe even impossible, actually practical now.
Exactly. And our mission today really is to unpack this whole intricate new regulatory landscape for you. We'll explore what L1C actually means, who it's designed for, and the practical steps you need to take to get yourself or your company certified. We'll also get into the pretty sophisticated safety mechanisms that are built in. And importantly, the really exciting future this unlocks for drone tech and its uses all across Canada. We want to cut through the jargon, get to the core stuff you need, give you that broader context, the implications, help you understand not just what's changing, but maybe why it really matters.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you've ever been curious about where drones are headed, or maybe you're already in the industry and looking to, seriously expand what you can do, this deep dive is your shortcut. We'll try to give you those surprising facts, the crucial details, the stuff that makes you go, but without hopefully making your head spin with too much information. So for everyone ready to navigate this new airspace. Okay, let's unpack this. Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. Beyond visual line of sight, BVLOS. Most of us, if we've flown a drone, we're used to seeing it, right? So what does it really mean when you can't see it anymore? And what's the biggest hurdle that creates for the pilot?
That's a great starting point because it really is a fundamental shift in thinking. Beyond visual line of sight just means you, the pilot, can't physically see the RPAS, the remotely piloted aircraft system with your own eyes. No binoculars, nothing. Just gone from view. And that's a huge departure from traditional drone flying where you have to keep eyes on it. The biggest challenge, safety. How do you stay safe? With BVLOS, the responsibility for keeping things safe, it shifts dramatically. It moves away from relying on the pilot constantly scanning the sky, that traditional see and avoid idea from regular planes, and moves towards relying on, sophisticated systems, technology, and really rigorous operational procedures. What's fascinating is how it replaces that direct visual input with something called detect and avoid, or DAA technologies, and these structured protocols. It's this shift, exactly this, that kind of trains drone pilots to be those mini airline captains you mentioned. They're relying on instruments, data feeds, not just looking out the window, so to speak.
Okay, so that's a massive leap, relying on tech instead of just eyes. Now, let's zoom in on this level 1 complex L1C. Canada's approach here seems really smart. It's targeted, right? Enabling these BVLOS flights, but in a lower risk way. The sources call it BVLOS, but maybe on a leash. Trying to get the utility, the usefulness, but carefully managing the risks. Sounds like a balancing act.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And that leash, those guardrails, they are incredibly specific and really crucial for safety. First off, airspace. L1C operations are strictly, and I mean strictly, confined to uncontrolled airspace only. That's non-negotiable. If any part of your planned flight path, even just a tiny bit, goes into controlled airspace, think Class C, D, or E, usually around bigger airports, then you're out of L1C. You need an SFOC, a Special Flight Operations Certificate, for that specific flight. This rule is all about keeping drones and crewed aircraft safely apart.
Okay, uncontrolled airspace only. Got it. What else is part of this leash?
Second, altitude. There's a hard ceiling. 400 feet above ground level, AGL. That's about 122 meters. This keeps things consistent with existing drone rules and generally keeps these L1C drones flying below where most regular planes operate.
Right, 400 feet. That makes sense. And the third piece? The population buffers.
Yes, the
Okay.
population buffers. This is a big one for ground safety. You need a minimum standoff distance of at least 1 kilometer, 1 whole kilometer from all populated areas. Think of it like an invisible fence, maybe a force field around towns, cities, even smaller communities. It's like a runway safety area, but for people on the ground. It gives a clear safety margin if something unexpected happens with the drone. Now, there is a little nuance here. For small RPAS, drones under 25 kilograms, there's a limited exception. They can operate over sparsely populated areas. That means areas that aren't dense towns or cities. Think maybe a few scattered farms, some cabins, that kind of thing. But they absolutely cannot fly over densely populated regions like suburbs or city centers. These three rules, airspace, altitude, population buffer, they form the core safety container for L1C.
Wow. Okay. Uncontrolled airspace under 400 feet and at least a kilometer away from towns, unless it's a small drone over a really sparsely populated area. That's a lot to juggle for every single flight plan, but I love this mnemonic the sources mentioned. It really helps boil it down. One for you. So 1 kilometer from people, 400 feet max altitude, uncontrolled airspace. That's actually a brilliant quick check, isn't it? Like, does my flight fit? One for you. Boom. A quick mental go-no-go. Hashtag tag 1.3, essential terminology for L1C operations. Okay, so we've got the basic rules of the road for L1C down, that 1-4U framework, but to actually operate, there's some key terminology we need to get our heads around. Let's start with the RPOC. That's RPAS, Operator Certificate. What exactly is that, and why is it so important for L1C?
Right, the RPOC. This is absolutely mandatory. It's an organizational approval. It's not just for the pilot, but for the individual or the company that's actually conducting the L1C operations. Think of it as more than just a license. It's a formal statement, a commitment, that the operator takes safety seriously at an organizational level. It means they have a robust safety management system and SMS in place. They have comprehensive training programs for their pilots. They have meticulous maintenance protocols for their drones. And they have detailed standard operating procedures, or SOPs. You could almost think of it as responsible people, organized company. It shifts safety from just being about the pilot's skill to being about the whole system being safe.
That makes a lot of sense. It's the whole operation, the company behind the flight that needs to be certified, not just the person flying it. And this RPOC, this organizational certificate, it links to the individual pilot too, right? What's the personal license they need? And how do these technical standards fit in? Like standard 922 and 923 for the aircraft.
Exactly, they're connected. For the individual pilot, the key thing is the pilot certificate level 1 complex. This is your personal license. This is what you, as the pilot flying the mission, need to hold legally. Then you have the technical standards for the drone itself and its systems. Standard 922, RPA's safety assurance. You can think of that like the drone's airworthiness certificate for these complex flights. It's where the manufacturer, or sometimes the operator, has rigorously proven that the drone itself is reliable, safe, and meets specific technical requirements. It covers things like how likely failures are, how the drone handles them. It basically guarantees the machine is fit for the job. Now, Standard 923, Vision-Based Detect and Avoid, this is where things get really interesting, and it's a point many people miss. It sets out the criteria for detect and avoid systems, the DAA we mentioned, but critically, it allows for human visual observers, actual people, to serve as your DAA system under specific conditions. So DAA isn't just about fancy sensors and expensive hardware on the drone itself. You can have a network of trained observers strategically placed acting as your eyes. This makes BVLOS much more accessible, especially for organizations maybe without huge budgets for the absolute latest tech, while still maintaining that crucial safety net. They become like human radar posts, or maybe like spotters in a team, keeping watch over the airspace the drone will fly through.
Wow, okay, that is a key point. So DAA can be people, not just sensors. That really changes the game for accessibility. Okay, moving on. When you're planning an L1C flight, the sources talk a lot about defining specific volumes. Operational volume, ground risk buffer, contingency volume. What are these volumes? Why are they so important for planning?
Yeah, these volumes are absolutely central to L1C planning. They define the three-dimensional sandbox for your flight, creating that essential safety bubble. The operational volume is pretty straightforward. It's the precise airspace where you intend the drone to fly. Your mission area. The ground risk buffer is that safety margin on the ground we talked about, the minimum distance you have to keep from people, maybe sensitive infrastructure on the ground. It's that invisible shield protecting things below. And finally, the contingency volume. This is your pre-planned Plan B airspace. It's a designated safe area where the drone can automatically go, maybe loiter or divert if something unexpected happens, like losing the control link, or if the DAA system detects a potential conflict. You can almost visualize them like hitboxes in a video game. Invisible boundaries, defining safe zones, where to fly, where not to fly near people, and where to go if things go wrong. It's all about containing the operation safely. Now, there's a really crucial piece of timing information here that everyone listening needs to lock in. As of today, September 14, 2025, even if you, say, aced the L1C exam tomorrow, you are not authorized to just start flying L1C BVLOS missions right away. There's a specific date we'll need to circle on the calendar.
Exactly. That's a huge point. The new L1C operational framework doesn't actually switch on, it doesn't activate until November 4, 2025. Before that date, any DVLOS flight generally still needs that old-style case-by-case special flight operations certificate, the SFOC. So this shift from what was basically a one-off permission culture for every flight to a standardized, scalable framework like L1C. It's a massive evolution for drones in Canada. But the starting gun doesn't fire until November 4th.
Yeah, and if we just, connect this to the bigger picture for a second, looking back helps appreciate how significant L1C really is. Before 2019, the drone rules in Canada were pretty fragmented. And any BVLOS flight, even something simple like checking a remote fence line, needed an SFOC. And that SFOC process, it was notoriously slow, really burdensome. We're talking months sometimes for approval. It created this huge bottleneck that really held back industry innovation and made scaling up drone operations almost impossible.
Oh, I can imagine the frustration for companies trying to use this tech. And even when the basic and advanced VLOS certificates came in 2019, the ones for flying within line of sight that helped streamline things, sure. But BVLOS flying beyond sight, that pretty much stayed stuck behind the SFOC wall, didn't it? Still very much a one-off approval game.
Precisely. So between roughly 2019 and 2024, you had industries like energy, utilities, mapping, really pushing hard for a better way for scalable BVLOS solutions. They saw the potential for huge efficiency gains, better safety in their work. Transport Canada, TC, listened. They started running trial projects, setting up pilot corridors specifically to test BVLOS. These trials use visual observers, various DAA technologies, layered safety controls, all to figure out how to do this safely and reliably. And the lessons learned from those trials, they directly fed into creating standards 922 and 923, the technical rules we just talked about. What's really interesting is that Canada was quite forward-thinking here. They actually pioneered this specific lower-risk BVLOS category, L1C, that arguably put Canada ahead of places like the U.S. in this specific regulatory area at the time. It was proactive.
So that whole SFOC bottleneck was really holding things back. But now L1C changed the game. I love the analogy in the sources. L1C is kind of like the Netflix version of BVLOS. Instead of waiting ages for one specific approval, like renting one movie, you get scalable, on-demand operations within a defined framework. Okay, so now that we get the rules, the history, the why behind L1C, who actually gets to fly these missions, let's talk about the people involved, the pilot and the operator requirements. Here's where it gets really interesting. All right, so if you're listening and thinking, okay, I want to be one of these L1C pilots, these mini airline captains, what's the path? What do you need? Well, first things first, there are some basic mandatory prerequisites. You absolutely have to be 18 years old or older, and crucially, you must already hold an advanced RPAS pilot certificate, no jumping straight to L1C. That advanced cert is your foundation, proving you understand complex drone ops already.
Right, those are the entry tickets. After that, it's a two-part assessment process to really ensure you've got both the knowledge and the practical skills. First, you have to pass the Level 1 complex online exam. And the pass mark is high, 80% or better. Plus, you've only got 90 minutes to do it. And these exams, they're designed by Transport Canada to be pretty rigorous. They're not just memorization. They often test your judgment, how you apply the rules in scenarios. They could have, let's say, tricky questions that really probe your understanding of the nuances. After you pass that online exam, the next step is a practical one. You have to successfully complete a Level 1 complex flight review. This is done in person with an authorized flight reviewer. And it's where you demonstrate your actual flying and operational skills in an L1C context.
Okay, exam passed, flight review passed, good to go forever. Or is there something else? I remember reading about recency.
Ah, yes, recency. Very important and easily overlooked. This is definitely something they test. To keep your L1C certificate valid, you have to show you're staying current. You need to have completed an exam, either advanced or L1C, had a certificate issued, or completed a flight review, again, advanced or L1C, within the last 24 months. And here's the really subtle but crucial part. Your L1C recency is directly tied to your advanced certificate recency. If your advanced certificate lapses because you haven't met its 24-month recency requirement, your L1C certificate also becomes invalid, even if you recently passed the L1C flight review.
Wow, okay, so you absolutely have to keep that advanced certificate current too. They're linked. Good to know.
Definitely. Now, about training. The regulations don't strictly mandate formal, practical flight training for L1C, beyond the flight review itself. However, given how complex BVLS can be and how fast the tech changes, a structured training program can really speed up the learning curve. Ground school, instructor time, practical exercises. That said, if you're a pilot with a ton of experience already, maybe lots of simulation time, or you were involved in those earlier SFOC-based BVLS trials, you might feel confident enough and have the skills to go straight for the flight review without extra formal training. It depends on your background.
So the pilot needs their L1C certificate and their advanced cert kept current. But that's not the whole picture, is it? We mentioned the RPOC earlier. It's absolutely critical, isn't it, that the entity conducting the flight, whether it's you as a freelancer or a big company, holds a valid RPAS operator certificate.
Paramount. Non-negotiable. The pilot certification is personal, but the RPOC is organizational. It signifies that the entire operation is set up for safety. The RPOC holder is responsible for ensuring a whole safety structure is in place. There has to be a designated accountable executive, someone ultimately responsible for safety. They need that robust safety management system, the SMS we talked about. It's not just a manual on a shelf. It needs to be active, used for risk assessment, incident reporting, continuous improvement. And the RPOC confirms they have proper training programs, solid maintenance protocols for their drones, and clear standard operating procedures, SOPs, that everyone follows. This really lifts BVLOS safety beyond just relying on a good pilot. It makes it systemic, organizational. And they have to keep records, declarations for their drones, SMS logs, maintenance reports ready for potential audits.
Right, audits. We'll touch on those later. Now, here's a specific detail from the sources, maybe a bit obscure, but definitely exam relevant. The rule about foreign operators. Can a company from, say, the U.S. just come up and get an RPOC to fly L1C here? Good catch. No, they can't directly hold a Canadian RPOC. A foreign drone company wanting to conduct L1C BVLOS operations in Canada must do so through a Canadian RPOC holder. They need to partner with or operate under the umbrella of a Canadian entity that has the RPOC. It's a regulatory measure to ensure Canadian safety oversight and compliance with our specific standards. Keep things accountable locally. What's really striking, though, is even with all this focus on procedures, certificates, and technology, the human element is still absolutely critical, maybe even more so in BVLS. Why? Because BVLS operations inherently place a much higher workload on the crew compared to flying VLS. You're not just glancing at the drone, you're actively monitoring multiple data streams, interpreting system status, managing complex software, maybe communicating with observers, all while maintaining situational awareness of the bigger airspace picture. It's mentally taxing.
I can totally see that. No direct visual feedback means you're relying entirely on instruments and communication, which makes crew resource management, CRM, absolutely essential, doesn't it? This isn't just about the pilot anymore. It's about clear, concise communication between everyone involved. The pilot, any visual observers being used, the mission planner back at base, maybe someone monitoring weather and NOTAMs in real time. It really hammers home that BVLS is a team sport. Everyone needs to be on the same page, constantly communicating.
Exactly. And the incident data backs this up. When things go wrong in BVLOS, what are the common factors? Fatigue, distraction, and breakdowns in communication consistently pop up as leading contributors. This stark reality is precisely why the RPOC's requirement for a strong SMS and rigorous training programs is so vital. These systems are designed specifically to mitigate these inherent human risks, to build in checks and balances, manage fatigue, and ensure clear communication protocols are followed. It's about supporting the human operators and catching potential errors before they lead to incidents.
Okay, so we've covered the people, pilots, and operators. Now let's get into the actual flight planning and execution. Before you even think about launching an L1C BVLS flight, there's a crucial pre-flight check. The 3 A's: authority, aircraft, and airspace. The sources stress this is absolutely non-negotiable, like no 3, no go. It's your fundamental safety gate check.
Let's break them down. First, authority. This is where you confirm everything related to permissions and qualifications. Does the pilot flying the mission, the RPAC, hold a valid L1C certificate? Are they 18+C? Is their recency current, both L1C and advanced? And does the operating entity, the company or individual, hold an active RPAS operator certificate, the RPOC? This check validates both the person and the organization are good to go.
Makes sense. Authority checks the people and the organization's license. What about aircraft? What are you verifying there?
Aircraft is all about the drone itself. Is it the right tool for the job, and is it properly declared or equipped? You need to verify that the specific drone you're using meets the requirements under Standard 922, meaning its technical safety and reliability have been assured for this type of operation.
Or, if you're relying on visual observers, does the system, drone plus observers plus procedures, meet the criteria under Standard 923 for detect and avoid? It's about ensuring the machine itself is inherently fit, reliable, and has the necessary safety features or supporting systems for this specific BVLOS flight.
Okay, authority, aircraft, and the third A, airspace. This one sounds like it could be the most dynamic. It absolutely is, and arguably the most critical for L1C compliance. Airspace means meticulously checking that your entire planned flight path, from start to finish, including your contingency areas, stays strictly within uncontrolled airspace. This isn't just a quick glance at a map. You need to consult the Designated Airspace Handbook, the DAH. You need to check current VNC VTA charts. And crucially, you must check the latest NOTAMs notices to airmen via the Canadian Flight Planning System, the CFPS. NOTAMs provide real-time updates on temporary restrictions like wildfire zones, military exercises, air shows, anything that could suddenly change the status of the airspace you plan to use. This proactive intelligence gathering is vital. I've heard stories like you mentioned of pilots planning perfectly based on charts only to find a last-minute NOTAM close their entire operating area. You have to do that final check.
Right, that diligence on airspace seems key. Now, let's talk more about the tech that enables this seeing beyond sight. Detect and avoid DAA is the core concept. How does a drone actually see and avoid potential conflicts when the pilot can't see it? Let's start with the high-tech approach under Standard 922, the declared systems.
Standard 922 systems are typically advanced, technology-based DAA solutions integrated right into the drone. Think onboard radar, maybe ADS-B receivers or transponders that detect signals from other aircraft, perhaps sophisticated cameras with AI processing. For these systems, the operator has the responsibility to rigorously test, document, and prove that the system reliably meets specific performance standards for detecting and avoiding conflicts. It's about verifying the technology's capability.
Okay, so that's the onboard sensor route. But you mentioned earlier, and this is really fascinating, that DAA isn't just about hardware under Standard 923. How does the visual observer-based DAA work in practice?
Right, this is Standard 923, and it's a really practical, accessible option. It explicitly allows trained human visual observers, VOs, to be your primary means of detect and avoid, provided certain conditions are met. You'd position these VOs strategically along the flight path, maybe on high points, so that they collectively maintain continuous, unaided visual coverage of the airspace where conflicts might occur, basically, where other aircraft might fly. They need clear communication links back to the pilot. They are constantly scanning the sky in their designated sector. If they spot an aircraft, they alert the pilot, who then takes evasive action. Think of them like extending the pilot's eyes over the horizon, using a relay team of human spotters. It's a system combining people, procedures, and communication.
That's a great explanation. Human radar posts, essentially. Okay, beyond DAA, what about the link between the pilot and the drone? The command and control, or C2 link, how critical is that for BVLOS?
Oh, absolutely paramount. The C2 link is your lifeline to the drone. Its integrity and reliability are non-negotiable in BVLOS. These links need to be specifically engineered and tested for robust performance over longer distances and potentially challenging conditions. Unlike flying VLOS, where a brief signal glitch might be recoverable because you can still see the drone, in BVLOS, factors like terrain blocking the signal, dense forests, or even heavy rain can have a much bigger impact on the C2 link's range and stability. So, planning often involves ensuring strong signal margins, maybe using redundant communication frequencies or technologies to guarantee you maintain control and data flow throughout the entire mission. Losing the C2 link in BVLOS is a serious emergency scenario.
We touched on checking airspace under the 3As, but let's dig deeper into the sources you need for that intelligence. It's not just one map, right? It's multi-layered. You start with the basics. VNCs and VTAs, visual navigation charts, and VFR terminal area charts. These give you the big picture, the general airspace classifications, geographical features.
Correct. Those are your foundation. But then you need to layer on the details from the Designated Airspace Handbook, the DAH. The DAH is essential. It gives you specifics on airspace classes, identifies special use airspace like restricted zones or military operating areas, MOAs, and tells you about mandatory frequency, MF, or aerodrome traffic frequency, ATF areas, around smaller airports, even those in uncontrolled airspace, where you might need to monitor or announce your presence.
Got it. Charts for the overview, DAH for the specifics, and the final crucial layer, the dynamic information.
That's the NOTAMs notices to airmen accessed via the CFPS, the Canadian Flight Planning System. This is where you find the most current time-sensitive information. temporary flight restrictions, TFRs for wildfires or VIP movements, military exercise activations that might pop up, special event airspace, maybe even unexpected closures of navigation aids. NOTAMs can completely change the picture from what the static charts or DAH show. Checking them right before flight is absolutely mandatory.
So it's about building this layered truth set, as the sources call it, cross-referencing everything charts, DAH, and current NOTAMs to get the complete, up-to-the-minute picture. That classic exam trap you mentioned, airspace, looking clean on the chart but being closed by a NOTAM, really highlights why this diligence is so critical. You have to confirm it's uncontrolled along the entire route.
The entire route, every segment, plus your planned contingency areas. If any part touches controlled airspace or airspace restricted by a NOTAM, the L1C plan is a no-go without modification or an SFOC.
Now let's revisit those volumes. Transport Canada really emphasizes thinking in terms of a concept of operations, a CONOPS, and defining these specific spatial zones: operational, ground risk, and contingency. How do these work together to build that safety bubble?
They work together precisely to define and contain the operation. The operational volume, as we said, is your intended flight path and mission area. It's where the work gets done. The ground risk buffer is that mandatory standoff distance from people or critical infrastructure on the ground, extending outwards from your operational volume. It's your protection zone for the public. And the contingency volume is your predefined safe haven. It's a specific block of airspace, also confirmed to be uncontrolled and clear of obstacles and population, where the drone is programmed to go automatically if certain emergencies occur, like lost link. This volume must be large enough for the drone to safely maneuver, maybe loiter, or initiate a landing, all while remaining compliant with L1C rules, below 400 feet, away from people, in uncontrolled airspace. Defining these three volumes accurately is a core part of L1C mission planning.
Okay, that contingency volume sounds like a key part of emergency planning. But just having a volume isn't enough, right? The regulations expect detailed, pre-written emergency procedures.
Absolutely. It's an explicit requirement. Operators must have detailed written procedures before the flight for handling a range of potential emergencies. We're talking, what happens if you lose the command and control link? What if the GPS signal degrades? Janice says degradation. What if you get a warning about engine or motor issues? Propulsion degradation. What if the battery starts acting up? Off nominal event. What's the procedure for attacks? Detect and avoid conflict alert. Just writing RTH, return to home, on your plan is totally insufficient. The procedure needs to be fully thought out, documented, and trained on. What are the steps the pilot takes? What are the automatic actions the drone takes? Who communicates what?
Right. And that return to home path, the RTH, it has specific constraints too, doesn't it? It can't just fly straight back over anything.
Critically important point. The RTH path must be programmed to remain entirely within your predefined contingency volume, and crucially, that RTH path and the contingency volume itself must never traverse or intrude upon populated areas. If your planned RTH route takes the drone over a small town or even a cluster of houses to get back to the landing site, that's a fundamental planning failure and makes the whole operation non-compliant. Best practice often involves setting up multiple potential RTH points or safe loiter areas within approved contingency volumes, giving the system safe options depending on where the emergency occurs, ensuring it always heads to a pre-vetted safe, unpopulated zone.
Okay, one more planning aspect: weather. Even though L1C is BVLOS and relies heavily on tech, the weather still matters quite a bit, doesn't it? There are specific rules pilots need to follow.
Yes, absolutely. Despite all the technology, Transport Canada mandates that L1C pilots must still adhere to the standard uncontrolled visual flight rules, or VFR, weather minima. These are laid out in the Canadian Aviation Regulations, CR Section 602.115. This acts as a conservative baseline. It means you still need certain minimum flight visibility and specific distances from cloud, even though you can't physically see the drone yourself. Essentially, the conditions need to be good enough that a VFR aircraft could theoretically see and avoid your drone, even if your primary safety mechanism is DAA.
So that leads to another potential exam trap, right? What if the weather starts okay, but then deteriorates during the flight? Say the cloud ceiling drops down to 400 feet AGL.
That's a classic scenario. Even if your drone is perfectly capable of flying in cloud or has sophisticated sensors, if the actual weather conditions drop below the legal VFR minima for uncontrolled airspace, like that cloud ceiling coming down to your flight level, or visibility dropping below the required distance, you must abort the mission or divert to your contingency volume and land safely. The technology doesn't give you a pass to ignore fundamental aviation weather rules designed for overall airspace safety. Human judgment and adherence to basic VFR principles remain key.
Okay, let's talk about actually getting that L1C pilot certificate. We know the prerequisites. 18 plus Asian, hold an advanced RPS certificate already. Then you've got the mandatory steps, pass that tough L1C online exam, 80% plus study mentions, and successfully complete the practical L1C flight review with an authorized reviewer. Those are the hurdles everyone has to clear.
Correct. Those are the non-negotiables. But then the question becomes, how do you best prepare for that exam and flight review? Is formal training the only way? Well, structured training programs, ones that offer ground school, maybe instructor-led sessions, practical flight exercises, they're certainly not the only way, especially now with so much information available online, AI tools, forums, etc. But structured training can significantly speed up the learning process, provide valuable insights from experienced instructors, and help ensure you cover all the required knowledge areas systematically, especially in a field changing as fast as drones. However, as we mentioned, if you're already a highly experienced pilot, perhaps with extensive simulation background or prior VVLOS work under SFOCs, you might have the knowledge and skills to self-study effectively and challenge the exam and flight review directly. It's about finding the pathway that fits your experience level.
Right, so there's some flexibility.
Yeah.
And the practical flight training component itself, beyond the mandatory flight review, that's technically optional, but probably highly recommended for most people.
Exactly. While not mandated by regulation before the flight review, dedicated practical training focusing on L1C procedures, emergency handling, crew coordination, and using the specific equipment can be incredibly beneficial. Experienced pilots might challenge the review directly, but for many transitioning to BVLOS, that hands-on practice is key to building confidence and competence.
That makes sense. And before even getting to real-world practical training, simulation seems like it would play a huge role, especially for BVLOS. You're making that mental leap from seeing the drone to trusting the instruments.
Simulation is incredibly powerful here, almost essential, I'd say. That transition from VLOS always having eyes on to BVLOSers relying entirely on systems, data feeds, and communication. It's a big mental shift. Simulation provides that safe, controlled sandbox environment to practice this. You can build confidence, refine your decision-making process when interpreting sensor data or handling simulated emergencies, all without putting an actual expensive drone or the public at risk. It helps bridge that visual gap safely.
So what does BVLS simulation typically look like? Are you just flying a drone on a computer screen?
It's often more sophisticated than that. Typically, you're in a piloting command or maybe a back seat role. You're monitoring what looks like a real fleet management system. Think something like DJI Flight Hub or similar platforms. You're watching live simulated video feeds, tracking all the critical system information. Is the RTK GPS lock? What's the altitude, horizontal speed, distance back to home base, battery percentage dropping? You're also practicing communication, maybe coordinating with simulated visual observers or mission planners. Some advanced simulators even integrate virtual controls, so you can practice executing automated flight plans, responding to dynamic requests like go check that anomaly, or initiating emergency procedures like return to home yourself.
And presumably, these simulations can be tailored to what the pilot will actually be doing.
Yes, that's key. Good simulation programs often tailor the scenarios to the student's likely real-world operations. Are they going to be doing pipeline inspections, progress monitoring on a construction site, site security patrols, infrastructure inspection? Tailoring the simulation makes the learning highly relevant and directly transferable to their job, building muscle memory for their specific tasks.
So you go through the training, maybe simulation, pass the exam, pass the flight review, you get the L1C certificate. But as you said earlier, that's really just the beginning, isn't it? The license is the start, not the end goal.
Precisely. The certificate means you've met the minimum standard. True operational proficiency, that deep competence and skill that comes from actually doing it, from practical, real-world application and experience.
Which raises the question of ongoing support. How do pilots bridge that gap from newly certified to truly competent and confident in diverse real-world situations? Does good training stop at the certificate?
Ideally, no. Forward-thinking training providers recognize certification as just step one. They often offer post-certification support. This might include things like continued access to online learning materials, maybe dedicated support sessions to help pilots accumulate practical BVLOS flight hours. Some even offer a sort of internal competency certification after, say, 10 documented flight hours under supervision. Access to specialized flight facilities or enterprise-level drones for practice can also be part of it. This structured support is really valuable for turning that theoretical knowledge into deeply ingrained skills, that true muscle memory for safe operations.
And imagine pilots run into unique questions once they start flying real missions, right? Things they didn't encounter in training, like how exactly do I assess population density for this specific weirdly shaped area? Or how do I interpret this confusing new NOTAM?
Absolutely. The real world always throws curveballs. That's where ongoing support, maybe mentorship from experienced pilots, or access to a community forum or resource center becomes invaluable. Having someone to call or a place to look up answers when facing those unique real-world complexities is crucial for maintaining safety, compliance, and just building confidence as you gain experience. Stepping back again, it's helpful to see L1C as part of a bigger regulatory journey. Think of it in phases. The old world, let's say before 2025. BVLOS in Canada was mostly experimental, pretty rare. Almost every single flight needed a specific custom SFOC. The main focus of the regulations was on VLOS operations for smaller drones under 25 kilograms. It was very much a cautious permission-based system.
Right, the SFOC bottleneck era. But now with L1C activating November 4, 2025, we enter the new world. This is the era of regulated, repeatable, and scalable BVLOS, specifically for these lower risk profiles defined by L1C. It's a fundamental shift away from needing a custom SFOC for every single rural pipeline inspection, for example. It moves towards a standardized framework.
Exactly. But L1C isn't the final destination. It's a crucial foundational step in a much broader, phased strategy for integrating drones into the airspace. If we connect this to the bigger picture and look ahead, short term, say 2025, 2026, the big focus will be getting L1C operational. Pilots and companies build experience, learn the ropes. Regulators gather data on how it's working. Compliance, especially with safety management systems, will be heavily scrutinized. It's about maturing the system.
Okay, so L1C gets established first. What comes next? Medium term.
Medium term, maybe the next 3 to 5 years after L1C launches, we expect to see Level 2 complex, or L2C operations start to open up. L2C is designed for higher-risk BVLOS scenarios. Think flying within controlled airspace, closer to cities or airports, maybe over less sparsely populated areas than L1C allows. This will demand even more advanced technology. Detect and avoid technologies, probably relying more heavily on things like radar, ADS-B integration, cooperative surveillance systems, and it will require much tighter integration and coordination with traditional air traffic control and crewed aviation.
So L1C is rural remote, lower risk. L2C starts moving towards more complex integrated environments. And the long-term vision.
The long-term vision, Canada's ultimate goal, seems to be the full, seamless integration of BVLOS drones into the National Airspace System, the NAS. Similar to what Europe is doing with U-Space, or following roadmaps like the U.S. BVLOS IRC recommendations. This future likely includes things like universal remote ID broadcasting for all drones, routine long-range flights along established corridors, think power lines, railways, pipelines inspected autonomously end-to-end, and eventually, probably under higher-level categories like L2C, or maybe even a future L3C, we could see urban BVLOS operations, like autonomous package delivery, becoming routine. It's a step-by-step expansion of that bubble of safety into progressively more complex airspace. #TAG5. Real-world scenarios and avoiding pitfalls.
All right, let's bring this down to earth. Theory is great, but applying it is key. Transport Canada exams love scenario questions that test your judgment on the details. Can this flight operate under L1C? Yes or no, and why? We need to run through some examples, always keeping that 1-4U test in mind. 1 kilometers from people, 400-foot max altitude, uncontrolled airspace.
Definitely. Let's start with some likely compliant L1C scenarios. Scenario 1, pipeline patrol, northern Alberta. Medium drone, say 15 kilograms, flying at 350 feet AGL. It's a remote area, 15 kilometers from the nearest town, patrolling 40 kilometers of pipeline. Why does this work? Altitude is good, 400 feet. Airspace is uncontrolled. Distance from population is great, 1 kilometer. Medium RPA is allowed in remote areas. Assume pilot operators are certified. Compliant. Key things to double-check here. Ensure the loss link contingency plan avoids any temporary work camps along the route, and verify no unexpected controlled airspace shelves exist nearby on the chart's DAH.
Okay, that one seems straightforward, remote ops. What about something closer to minimal habitation?
Scenario 2. Forest survey after wildfire. Small drone, 25 kilograms, flying 200 feet AGL. It's a sparsely populated area. Maybe a few isolated cabins visible, but definitely not a town. Mapping the burn zone BVLOS. Why does this likely work? Small RPAS can operate over sparsely populated areas. Altitude is good, 400 feet. Assume uncontrolled airspace. Compliant. The trick detail here, you absolutely must check for NOTAMs. An active wildfire often have a TFR, temporary flight restriction, over it. If so, you'd need special permission. L1C wouldn't be enough on its own.
Good point about the NOTAMs. What about using visual observers for DAA?
Scenario 3. Mine haul road inspection. Small drone, 300 feet AGL, following a remote northern haul road, no towns nearby, inspecting 25 kilometers of road. This can work compliantly using VO-based DAA, standard 923. You'd need to strategically place trained visual observers maybe every 8-10 kilometers on high points, ensuring they have clear, continuous, unaided visual line of sight to the airspace the drone will transit through their sector, and reliable communication with the pilot. The VOs act as the DAA system.
Okay, VO-based DAA works if planned properly. One more compliant one.
Scenario 4. Railway BVLOS inspection. Small drone, 300 feet AGL following a remote prairie railway line. Passes occasional isolated farmhouses. Inspecting 50 kilometers of track, why it likely works. Sparsely populated exception applies to the small RPAS for the farmhouses. Uncontrolled airspace confirmed via checks. Contingency volume established over, say, a large empty field with landowner permission. Compliant. The potential pitfall. If that railway line happens to pass within 1 kilometer of even a small village or town site along that 50-kilometer route, that section, and potentially the whole plan, becomes non-compliant with L1C. Route planning is key.
All right, those examples show how it can work. Now for the failure points. Let's run through some scenarios that would not be compliant with L1C, highlighting the specific rule they break. Scenario 5. Shoreline monitoring near Vancouver. Medium drone, 300 feet AGL, flying 5 kilometers offshore. Looks good, right? But the flight path gets close to the Class C control airspace extending out from YVR Airport. Why does this fail L1C?
Simple. Eclipse controlled airspace. L1C is strictly for uncontrolled airspace only. Even a tiny incursion into Class C, D, or E makes it non-compliant. The fix. Redesign the route to stay further offshore, entirely clear the controlled zone, or apply for an SFOC.
Okay, airspace is a hard line. What about the population buffer? Scenario 6. Farmland BVLOS spraying. Medium drone flying low at 100 feet AGL over a large farm field. But the edge of the field is only 800 meters from a small town. Why fail?
Fails the 1 kilometer population standoff. Doesn't matter how low you fly or that it's over farmland. That 1 kilometers, 1,000 meters buffer from the edge of the populated area is mandatory for medium RPAS, and even small RPAS when near actual towns. 800 meters is too close. Classic trap.
Right, that 1 kilometer rule is absolute. Scenario 7, Mountain Valley Survey, medium drone, 350 feet AGL flying down a valley. The airspace itself is uncontrolled Class G. They plan to use visual observers for DAA. Why might this still fail?
It fails if the terrain blocks the VO's line of sight. In a winding mountain valley, observers positioned on ridges might not be able to maintain continuous visual coverage of the airspace the drone will fly through. If the VOs can't see the required airspace due to terrain, the VO-based DAA system isn't valid. The fix would require using an aircraft with a declared technology-based DAA system, standard 922, that isn't reliant on line of sight from the ground.
Terrain matters for VOs.
Okay.
Scenario 8, bridge inspection near town. Small drone, 150 feet AGL, inspecting a bridge. The bridge itself is 600 meters from the edge of a small town. Fails why?
Again, fails the 1 kilometer population standoff. Even though it's a small drone, it's operating near a defined populated area, the town, not just sparsely populated countryside. That 1 kilometer buffer applies. 600 meters is inside the buffer.
Scenario 9. Remote camp supply route. Medium drone, 300 feet AGL, flying a route across remote tundra. But the route passes directly over a fly-in mining camp. Issue.
Issue. Mining camps, construction camps, work sites with people living, working there are generally considered populated areas for these regulations. Flying directly over it, or even within 1 kilometer, would require an SFOC or a route redesign to maintain the standoff.
Good point about camps. Last one, Scenario 10, aerodrome proximity. Small drone, 250 feet AGL, operating 5 kilometers away from a small registered aerodrome, like a local flying club field, in uncontrolled Class G airspace. Seems far away, but why could this still be a problem for L1C?
It could fail because L1C has specific restrictions about operating near any aerodrome listed in the Canada Flight Supplement, even uncontrolled ones, to avoid conflicts with arriving departing traffic. You generally need to confirm via NOTAMs and the DAH that there's no active mandatory frequency, MF, or aerodrome traffic frequency, ATF, that requires monitoring and maintain appropriate separation, potentially coordinating with the aerodrome operator. Simply being in Class G isn't enough if you're close to an airport environment. 5 kilometers might require extra checks and procedures beyond basic L1C.
Those scenarios really highlight the details. Let's summarize some of the most common exam traps and misconceptions people have about L1C. First big one. I passed the L1C exam. I can fly BVLOS now. True or false?
Definitely false. Passing the exam is just one piece. You still need to pass the flight review, meet the 18+ age requirement, have your advanced cert current, ensure your operator has an RPOC, and wait until November 4, 2025 for the framework to even activate. Big misconception.
Right. Another one, L1C lets me do any kind of BVLOS flight. Is that right?
No, also false. L1C is only for lower risk BVLOS. Remember, 14U. 1 kilometers from people, under 400 feet, uncontrolled airspace only. Anything higher risk closer to towns, in controlled airspace, higher altitude still needs an SFOC for now, or will fall under future rules like L2C. L1C isn't a free-for-all.
We talked about this, but it seems like a major trap. DAA detect and avoid is all about expensive sensors on the drone.
Classic trap. False. Transport Canada explicitly allows for visual observer VO-based DAA under Standard 923. It's a system approach. DAA can be achieved with well-trained people and procedures, not just technology.
And those population standoff rules, easy to forget the exact distance or the small drone exception.
Very easy to mix up. That 1 kilometer rule from populated areas is fundamental. And remembering that small RPAS only get an exception over sparsely populated areas, not towns, is key. This is tested often because ground risk is so important. Easy points to lose if you forget.
And finally, the airspace boundary. Just clipping the edge of controlled airspace for a second is probably okay for L1C, right?
Absolutely not okay. Another major trap. L1C demands strictly uncontrolled airspace for the entire operation. Thorough checking of DAH, charts, and especially current NOTAMs is vital to avoid even the slightest incursion. No margin for error there. And it's not just about passing exams or planning correctly. Operators need to know Transport Canada actively audits drone operations. They can show up, announced or unannounced. And when they audit, having all your paperwork perfectly in order is just as crucial as flying safely. Your RPOC certificate, your SMS manual and logs showing you use it, aircraft declaration paperwork, STD 922-923 proof, maintenance records, pilot training files, flight review records, proof of recency. They'll want to see it all.
Okay, so the audits are real and the documentation is critical. This brings up an important point. If they do find violations, what are the consequences? Are we talking a slap on the wrist?
Definitely not just a slap on the wrist. Operating BVLOS without the proper certifications, pilot and operator, or flying outside the L1C rules, or not having your SMS in order, these can result in very significant fines. The regulations state penalties can reach up to $15,000 per violation. That really underscores how seriously Transport Canada takes compliance with these BVLOS rules. It's about ensuring safety, and the penalties reflect that. This raises the important question for any operator. How robust are your systems and your documentation? Are you truly ready for an audit? #tag outro.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today. A really massive shift in drone aviation here in Canada. We took a deep dive into the Level 1 complex BVLOS operations, breaking down those critical 14U rules, exploring the different ways detect and avoid systems can work, outlining all the pilot and operator requirements, the planning, the history, and even looking ahead to the future. It's clear this L1C framework is opening up huge new possibilities for efficiency, for innovation, but it's doing it with a very strong emphasis on safety, demanding a lot from both the technology and the people involved.
It really is significant. And it's not just about letting drones fly further for the sake of it. It's about enabling practical applications that were difficult or impossible before. Think about inspecting hundreds of kilometers of pipeline efficiently, monitoring vast remote environmental areas after events like fires or floods, managing resources more effectively on large sites, maybe even delivering essential goods to remote communities. L1C allows these things to move from being experimental one-off projects to becoming potentially routine, scalable operations. It really shows Canada's commitment to integrating drones safely into our society, moving them from the fringes into the mainstream, allowing all this potential to be understood and actually applied.
So as we wrap up, what does this all mean for you listening right now? As we step into this new era of BVLOS, here's something to think about. What might the world look like when these initial invisible fences around towns, the L1C boundaries, eventually evolve? When drones become more seamlessly integrated, maybe handling deliveries, monitoring traffic, assisting first responders right in our communities? What new challenges, but also what incredible opportunities will emerge as that bubble of safety around drones continues to expand, moving into more complex airspace like LTC and beyond? How might it fundamentally change how we interact with and even perceive the sky above us? Something provocative for you to mull over until our next deep dive. That's a wrap on today's mission, Commander. See above, go beyond, get ahead. For more training, tools, and intel, head to skycommander.ca. If you learned something new, share it, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star debrief.